Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think a lot of things have already been said today that needed to be said by members of our party, the party which is actually showing up for this particular committee hearing. I'm going to be brief, but it comes to mind that a gentleman that led South Dakota, former governor, by the name of George Mickelson, used to say that things get done by people that show up. He didn't say things get done by people that don't show up or that are protesting. The reality is our friends on the other side of the aisle, and we know them personally, they're good people. They've decided that this is a protest, and it's a protest because they're not going to receive a nominee that they wanted. When they lost the election, it was hard on them, and they're still feeling that pain. And because of that, their protest here by not showing up slows down the work of the Senate. It won't stop the work of the Senate, but it does show one of the reasons why it's so hard to get lots of different things done that I think the American people really wanted to see get done. Scott Pruitt is the Attorney General. He comes in with the qualifications clearly in a position to make changes within the Environmental Protection Agency that many of us wanted to see. He believes in sound science. He's one of the guys that understands that regulations really do impact the day-to-day lives of American citizens. He understands that state and local units of government should have a say in how those regulations are established. The EPA, when it works correctly, works in a federalist role, one in which they cooperate and coordinate with state and local units of government. I thought he would add value at the EPA, and I think in the future he will. Simply delaying the change in leadership at the Environmental Protection Agency does not help our country. I think for our friends on the other side of the aisle, I think, when we were growing up, our mom and our dad used to tell us that it isn't one of those things that's appropriate to simply say, if I'm mad at the game that's chosen, I'll take my ball and go home. And yet that's kind of what we're seeing here. And it'll change, but in the meantime, we have to work our way through this. I think we have to be the adults in the room. We have to act like adults in the room. I think we'll follow the rules, but we will eventually approve Mr. Pruitt as the next administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency. But in the meantime, it has slowed down the process within the United States Senate. A lot of things in which both Republicans and Democrats can agree on. Time on the floor of the Senate is extremely valuable, and it's one that I think Republicans and Democrats both agree that time, when it is as valuable as what it is, can't be wasted. Unfortunately, what we're seeing from our colleagues is every opportunity that they can to slow down the work in the United States Senate continues. They have slowed down. They've declined in many cases to give time back, even when they're done with the debate. And this is just one more glaring example of a dysfunction within this body that could really work better than what it does today. And so I think rather than simply beating them up over this time and time again, we should simply remind them that I think we all know that there's a better way to get this stuff done. And simply not showing up for a committee hearing is probably one of the more childish things and one of the more childish behaviors when it comes to protesting. I think the value here could have been if they were on the other side of the aisle and simply pointed out their point of view. And if they disagreed with or if they had reasons why Mr. Pruitt should not be identified as the next administrator, to be able to come in and to voice those and to lay out their arguments appropriately in opposition to our arguments in favor of him would have been a healthy discussion that would have been an example to young people across this country about the way that our government should work. And that open and public debate and discourse, that's a healthy part of this process. But simply not showing up because you lost an election is probably not the most appropriate way to set an example for the next generation. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would acknowledge the way in which you've handled this series of committee hearings. It has been fair. Mr. Pruitt has answered over 1,000 more questions than anybody else applying for this job has in the past. And it simply is clear that our friends on the other side of the aisle have chosen what I believe to be the wrong way to protest the loss of an election, and they have provided additional reasons to point out the dysfunction that sometimes occurs in what should be a very deliberative body in the United States Senate. And with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for what you've done to try to move this process forward.
Thank you very much, Senator Rouse.